It is not just the top. No questions in here.
They will be there once people ask about it. Ask us.
Draft script for Cherie and Naomi, and draft script for Chanel and Tanya. I'm undone by that. I just knew you were gonna have some questions listed on that to start with.
Tell a lie.
You were gonna have some questions.
Y'all are live. Go ahead and go.
Okay, so
I know if you were doing an introduction, never mind.
me either. Okay, so how about I say this? Welcome to Black Women Demands a Dialogue series, where they have a little caption line under it that says no demands on Black women without listening to Black women's demands. And so basically Cherie Davis invited us here to do this, and we are supposed to sort of feel our way through the process as I'm actually feeling my way through what I'm actually even saying right now. But it's I'm Melanie Price, and I'm going to be talking to you, and this is Angela Lang, and I'm sorry, we'll be talking to each other, and hopefully we come up with some thoughts that are sort of generative questions. I'll start by introducing myself, Angela, and then you can introduce yourself. But I was thinking about this last night. Like, I want you to introduce yourself, not like sort of, I'm gonna give you the short version. Like,
Okay.
I was thinking you need to man spread this introduction. You know what I mean? You need to just say all of it. So I am Melanie Price. I am an endowed professor of political science at Prairie View A&M University, which is also my alma mater. I am the director of the Ruth J. Simmons Center for Race and Justice, and I'm the principal investigator for the African American Studies Initiative. I have become the person with 10 jobs. I'm a political scientist by training. I'm a native Houstonian. I like to tell people that it's me, Beyonce, and Barbara Jordan. We're all from the same area of town, actually, which is also nice. Obviously, Beyonce is from the more wealthy part of it, but either way, we're all from the same part of the town. That's enough about me. How about you, Angela?
Awesome. I am Angela Lang. I use she, her pronouns. I am the founder and executive director of an organization called Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, based in Milwaukee. I always kind of start an introduction and tell people I'm a 31-year-old pansexual millennial Black woman that works in politics and organizing in the state of Wisconsin. Just that alone can tell you a lot about the struggles and my lived experiences, a lot of which I'm sure we'll get into today. And I think for me, I noticed being able to list and to name those identities is important, because I think it does give people some context of how I view the world, how I walk into a room, and the space and the work that I carry with me every day. So
Angela's a wonderkin. I'm now getting far enough along in age where I can say to a 31-year-old, "You're so brilliant." I remember when I was your age. So I would like for everybody to hear, really, Angela, tell them, I mean, you know how a professor becomes a professor. They go to graduate school, boom, they have they are a professor. But I think you talking about how you came into this organizing work is a great place to start. I'm not going to take this over. I just don't know what else to do next. And so I'm trying to keep going. Okay.
yeah, it's really funny how I got here, because I feel like looking at my career, it's just a series of stumbles, and I just happened to be here. I did not set out to become an organizer or an executive director.
Those are the best ways. Everybody, like, people stumble into stuff all the time, that you're doing it right.
I can't, people ask for advice, like, how do I break? I was like, I don't know. I didn't even expect to be here. I don't know. Just follow your heart. So that's kind of what happened. I was one of those kids that wanted to be everything under the sun. I said, I wanted to be the first woman president. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be whatever. I want to be a construction worker, all of that. And as I grew up, I started to see a lot more inequities. Being raised by a single white mother with terminal cancer, who had to figure out how to make ends meet with, one, raising a Black child is in and of experience of itself, being a white mother, but then also having to balance a terminal illness and also provide for your family, and living wages were not a conversation at the time. And so seeing what she had to go through, seeing a lot of inequities, I didn't have the language for it, but I knew it was wrong and it wasn't right. And I got to campus and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I started my undergrad. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna do Doctors Without Borders. I'm pre-med. That lasted till sophomore year.
As an African American studies professor, we diligently wait for y'all to realize that you're not going to be doctors.
Yeah.
Come.
I started to do a lot more organizing on campus. I started working with the ACLU a little bit. I had ties to them in high school, but started to do a lot of nonpartisan work. And then flash forward to 2010, Scott Walker was elected governor. Basically all hell broke loose in the state of Wisconsin. If people remember the uprisings and the protests around collective bargaining, I was a part of the student movement at the time. So seeing labor rights and student rights really intersect was really interesting. And from then on, I just like, all right, I'm gonna be an organizer. And so I worked for a labor union. I worked for a PAC in 2016. And then I basically try to take all my lived experiences, good, bad, and otherwise, that I've learned along the way, bring it to Block. And it's just like, what can we do better? Like, all of these things that y'all are doing don't work. We're gonna be over here doing something different. And we're not gonna stick to these rigid ideas or tactics, because we as Black
Block
people,
stands for
Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, we know that we know what's best for our community. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing things differently. But I think generally, I realized I'm one of those people that, like, I can't see injustice and just sit, right? Or I can't just like be an activist. I want to do more. I want to help shape strategy. I wanted to shape conversations. I want to get people involved. I want people to be trained and developed. And so I think that's really what brought me to organizing, but it wasn't something I set out to do at all, really.
I think Cherie put us together because I'm starting this new Center for Race and Justice on Prairie View's campus, and you are a person who is in the field doing this sort of race and justice work. But actually, while you were talking, the thing that I thought about is we both are also people who are doing our work at home, right? Mm-hmm. That is in the communities where we were raised, with the people where we came of age. And that presents its own rewards and challenges, right? It's people who know your past, but you're trying to get them to look towards a different future. And so for me, that means that I'm walking around on a campus that I first, started to be on when I was 18 years old. And I'm being a professor, but I'm also having these sort of flashbacks from homecoming, when I was 20 or something like that. And I think it's interesting to think about what it's like to do work in your community. You know what I mean? Yeah. Lots of people are organizers. They're organizing in places where they're not from, and it's different when people know you and they have these expectations of you. How has that been for you? For me, it's been weird because, like, in the middle of conversations while I'm trying to conduct business, they'll say, "How is your mama?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute." This
is a feeling.
Serious meeting. Yes.
I know the feeling. I always tell people, not to knock other people that go to other places to organize.
I don't have a problem with it. It's just an interesting,
Yeah, I think it's common. I think people do it all the time. And I enjoy this question. I enjoy talking about it because I always say there's something beautiful and like deeply personal about being able to organize where you're from. And it's a conscious decision. I grew up in Milwaukee. I've never lived anywhere else. I went to college down the street from where I'm sitting right now. Like, I'm Milwaukee through and through. And it's not because I didn't have opportunities. I could go work in DC or New York if I wanted to. But there's something beautiful about seeing the neighborhoods change, the people change. I think that the tight-knit bond, and also when you're doing this work, I think sometimes I tend to be very scrappy about it. That's something I need to fix. I need to operate from a place of abundance and not from like scarcity. But that also means like we hustle and it's just like, all right, we need a DJ. Who do we know? And we're like, oh, you got a DJ? You know somebody? Cool. I didn't know who this DJ was. He showed up and I was like, why does he look familiar? Because we grew up together. We lived in the same apartment building as we were kids. And, it's just stuff like that, but being able to know who you can count on, know who you can rely on, and have those things and build that sense of community. There's just like a certain element that just adds value to regular organizing that I don't think everyone has, unfortunately.
But then you have to challenge somebody.
It's tough, yeah.
Who knew you when you were 18. Yeah. Or you have to challenge people who at a different point in your life, you would have deferred to them because they were the people, they were the authority people over you. They were your professors, they were your babysitters, they were your parents' friends, they were the lady who lived down the block. They were those people. And then you have to be able to say, I know you know me, you see me as the child that you know, that you knew, but now I'm coming to you as an adult with authority. And sometimes that for me has been sort of a tricky relationship. The head of the leader of the division that my department is in was my professor when I was 18. Right. And we get along well, but also I have to remember to say, I have to remember to tell myself, I'm not still his student. And in fact, we're colleagues now. And so I'm not going to do that thing because I don't want to do it. Whereas when he was my professor, I saw him as an expert in certain things. And so he had, there was a different kind of relationship. And so it also means that you have to renegotiate all kinds of relationships in your community as well. And that has been sort of very interesting for me, right?
It can be hard. It's hard. It's emotional sometimes, given the relationship. Like, I think as you were talking, I was thinking of, on one hand, there's been several of my supervisors who I used to work under who are now like, we're on the same level. We're directors of organizations. And so the nature of the relationship shifts a little bit. And it could be a little
places you have to protest.
Yes. I mean, there's definitely some people that I know that were in the same age range and they're elected officials. And I'm like, boy, I remember when you had the baggy t-shirt on and the braids. Don't think you different now because you sit wrong with a suit.
I was telling my students yesterday, look, politics, people confuse self-interest and selfishness all the time.
Yeah.
Right? They think because you're aware of your needs, of the things that are in your interest, and you talk about yourself as a person who has needs, demands, boundaries, then that's selfish, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right. And so what you're actually doing, or what I feel like I'm actually doing, is telling them, I had different kinds of needs when you met me when I was 18, but I'm 48 now. And I have boundaries, I have desires, I have things that I need to get done. And it's okay to ask for those things in the way that I want them to be done, right? And it's that kind of skill building that's key, because if you don't do it, then you run the risk of really sort of people infantilizing not just you, but your work as well, right? Your work is kid work if you don't tell them I'm grown now, right? Yeah. Oh, that's just Angela over there doing, Angela, I remember her, she's just doing something now.
Yeah.
When the work is more serious than that.
How do those conversations go for you? Because I'm thinking
sometimes not very well.
I'm like, I don't see some of them going well for me if I were to be explicit and have a conversation.
Sometimes not very well, but I'm an Aries and I'm not very good at subtlety. And so sometimes I just say stuff. Now I have learned at the very least to put some space between the thing that made me feel like I have to have the conversation and the conversation, right? Because if I do it right away, Lord knows what will happen, right? But I try to put some space between it, and it doesn't always go well. Some people will refuse to see a change in authority. But those are some of the things that we learn, right? And so thinking about the 2020 election, part of what's interesting to me about the 2020 election is groups like yours. We tend to think of the traditional civil rights organizations doing the get out the vote. We tend to think of traditional churches and they're the ones who get out the vote. But the real story of the 2020 election is how local organizations all around the country, like yours, did the Democratic Party a solid. And part of that means that you're not beholden to them.
Right.
So you can use that same force that got them into the White House to actually turn around and protest it. And you don't, and I think I love about some of these younger groups like yours is you're like, I'm happy to do it.
Yep.
Like the emotion where other people be like, wait, I know I sat on this stage with you and I don't want to be seen as a person who does this one day and challenge, but you tell us more about the work you were doing during the election. I just think it's so awesome.
I mean, you said a lot there. Because I just want to go back to like doing the Democratic Party a solid. It's something that I've wrestled with is we have a partisan arm where we do express advocacy, vote for candidate X. We also do, nonpartisan work and voter registration and stuff. And so it's robust. We're not beholden to a Democrat or a Republican or a socialist or whatever. We have our own endorsement process. But a good friend of mine was like, I think sometimes people just see you all as like a vendor for Black votes for the Democratic Party. And I was like, for real, we do a lot more than that. Like it's civic engagement as a whole. And I realized that people don't have an understanding of civic engagement outside of just voting.
I think it's also because people only pay attention to politics. Many people only pay attention to politics during presidential elections.
Right.
And so they're only paying attention to what you're doing during the presidential election because that's the moment that they're paying attention to politics. Whereas they're not in city council meetings when you're down there causing trouble, unless it makes, good trouble. I love, when you're down there causing trouble, like they only see that if it makes the news, right? But everybody is paying attention to presidential elections. And it would actually be a mistake, I think, for people. I know groups like yours got a lot of criticism in 2020. I'm suspecting, I don't know, but I know other groups got a lot of criticism for the work that they did around the 2020 election and getting the Democratic Party installed. But how are you making that calculation? I mean, for me, I'm like, look, I'm just trying to get this person out who is terrible. I'm not saying Joe Biden, I'm not saying Joe Biden is a hero. I'm saying maybe I can catch my breath for a minute. Maybe I can get this foot off my neck.
Yep.
While I'm thinking about what I do next. And because they don't pay your salaries, you're not paid by the Democratic Party, then you can turn around and when they don't fulfill the promises, then you just protest them.
Right. And I think it was hard for us. We didn't make an endorsement as an organization in the primary at all. We all had our own individual people and it bounced anywhere between Castro, Warren, and Bernie. That's where all of our people ended up. So that gives you a glimpse of our people, right?
Castro, wonderful twin from Texas, just like me.
I love the Castro brothers. Like I adore them. I think they're amazing. I endorsed Castro personally. I love him dearly. But like it was interesting because I think we all collectively, even though we joked around and debated who our candidates were, we all low-key said Joe Biden's at the bottom of the list, right?
Right.
Like he was not even like third or fourth, like he was bottom, right? And we used to joke around. I was like, look, I don't care who gets out of the primary, just don't make me vote for Joe Biden, right? And then like North Carolina happened, and I was like, oh, this is happening. And so we had to have more and more conversations as a team. And the way part of my leadership style is that I'm not going to make a decision on behalf of the whole organization if I'm not the one that has to do the selling of it, right? And so every time we have conversations about candidates, even if I like a candidate but other people aren't rocking with it, they're the ones that got to persuade people on doors and texts and phone calls, not me. And so we had conversations. We all kind of were like, oh, we rolled our eyes. we have been talking as an organization and trying to build the community awareness around the 94 crime bill. Like, we've been talking about this. So now it seemed, I didn't want it to seem like, oh, we're being hypocritical now, or this or that. So it was very hard for us. We also definitely kicked the can as far down the road as possible. They were
Right.
like, are you going to do this in May? Or I was like, we're going to wait till after he's officially the nominee.
Look,
after the DNC.
politics makes strange bedfellows. And it's interesting in the current movement. We are very much still in the protest phase, but at some point, just like the black congressmen now, who people are like, they're establishment, many of them were in the same place as a lot of you, and you will be tapped. People will ask for you to run for office, and then the question becomes sort of what that looks like, right? And Mayor Angela Lang.
My friend is trying to get me to do it. No.
Mayor Angela Lang, would look very different, right? Than organizer Angela Lang, right? Angela Lang. And so, I mean, I have no desire to run for office whatsoever. The thing I love about my job is I get to be around politics. I get to talk about politics. I get to tell people what I think about politics. But for me, I'm really just sort of writing about how I see things fitting together, why I'm interested in particular things. And so I follow grassroots politics in this election a lot, because grassroots is where the hope is.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you look at presidential politics without looking in 2020, without looking at what the grassroots were doing, first of all, you can't understand Georgia at all. You can't understand Arizona at all. You can't understand. There's lots of things you can't understand, but more importantly, you don't have hope. It's all cynical.
Yeah.
It's all cynical. And so, well, all cynical for me. Other people might find it enlightening, but it's all cynical. And so for me, the grassroots is where the hope is. So when I write, I always try to think about sort of where the grassroots, what they're doing in these moments, because the most hopeful actions for me are the ways that Black people use the streets to expand our notions of liberty in this country. And that was true in 1776, that was true in 1976, and that is true in 2020, right? They are the ones who are pushing the envelope. They take that Constitution and they stretch it. It's like they stretch it out as far as it can possibly go. And inevitably, when they do it, it covers so many more people, right? It's like the ethic of that is the thing that makes me hopeful. And so I try to focus on that. Like, people ask me, like, what is the thing that makes you hopeful? And I'm like, these kids in the street, and I include you in that. Like, these kids in the street, they are the things that make me hopeful, because even though I think sometimes in their language, it sounds like they have resigned themselves from the American project, but you don't go in the streets if you don't think it's gonna matter. Right. And so you want to resign yourself from it. And there are ways that you are trying, I think, when you're young, to come to grips with this antagonistic relationship. But you go out in the streets because you believe out in the streets you're going to end up with something better. And that's sort of the hope thing that makes me happy to talk to you and to talk to people like you.
I appreciate that. I know last time we spoke, we started to dig in a little bit more about like archives and whatnot. Right. And so I'm wondering, given what you were just talking about, what did you see that was unique about the grassroots, and specifically, because I feel like a lot of my people and a lot of the grassroots organization tend to have strong leaders of color, if not Black women specifically, like Nse Ufot in Georgia, like hands down, right? And so I'm wondering if you're seeing this like evolution of like the strength and the deepness and the impact of grassroots organizations and ones that are specifically led by Black women.
So let's go back a little bit in case people who are listening. One of the things when Angela and I were talking about this before is I kept telling her, you need to keep a journal. You need to write down things. because we are going to want to know how you did this. And you, Black women especially, they get caught up in the work. They don't have time to write it down because the time they're using to write it down, they could be doing something else, right? And I was telling Angela, you need to write it down, even if you do like a weekly reflection on what happened during that week, because we're going to be looking to you to say, we're going to want your papers. There will be a scholar, there will be someone who will write a book about the women who were leading these movements under the broad sort of, movement for Black Lives umbrella. And they're going to want to know, like, what was their life like? Were there inner turmoils? Were there struggles? Because what happens sometimes, I think, is if you look at past women, it's their journals that help us understand that they're human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you read Ida B. Wells and she is talking about, how, if these white men keep lynching so many Black men, we're not going to wonder about the Black men. We're going to start wondering about the white women, which is essentially what she said. Why y'all women always getting into this predicament? Essentially is what she argues. But then you look in her journal and you learn about how she's also dragging her children everywhere well before people are doing it. And so she is out here with babies and people are like, here come Ida and her children. Like, we want to know that about you. And it's better if you write it now than try to go back and recreate it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be good for you too, because you'll want to know. And some of this stuff you'll forget because you're in the moment of doing it.
Yeah. I think it's important. When you said that before, it stuck with me. And so like, I bought a bunch of journals and I'm like trying to be more intentional with like writing journals.
Yeah, I still haven't. I was also encouraging myself to do this. I still haven't done it, but yes.
I took my I do like a weekly email that is like, it's very personal. It's not like this sugar coated, let's go through a comms team and have a donation. It's just like me typing and it goes out to all the donors and supporters. And I pulled all of them. I was like, I'm gonna put all of them in a folder now so I know where they are. And so I'm thinking about all of that. And I think it's important because I think it captures like what isn't always captured in the history books, I think is the nuance. The tensions that we hold, right? Are the history books going to talk about the tension about divesting versus defunding the police?
That's
an important tension to hold. And is that going to like fully capture it? And I think if we really want to understand the events of January 6th, if you want to understand the events of what led up to the election, what led up to Inauguration Day, I think we need to really kind of dig into that nuance, because I'm still processing like we know how we got to January 6th. Like I hate when people are like, I don't know how we got here. Yeah, read a book.
This is amazing.
We have histories, we have textbooks that say how we got
we
here.
know how it happened that very day because we saw the president say, go down there. And he literally said, I'm going to be down there.
I'm going to walk with you. And he dipped and went home.
He said that. I was like, that man is not going nowhere with y'all.
I can't go with y'all. Show up. But I think what's interesting is that literally the day before the events in Georgia, the election in Georgia happened. And so I couldn't help but to feel like it was this almost personal. I mean, there's lots of reasons that I felt personally attacked, but it felt like a personal attack because I know some of the Black women in Georgia that carried the state. And then all of a sudden it's like the pendulum and there's like this visceral response to the power of Black people and specifically Black women. And just seeing how like Stacey Abrams, bless her heart, and all of just, to me, I couldn't help but just to see the timing of it, of like the instant you start to see a groundswell of Black women that are dope and powerful in communities starting to be able to be empowered, you got people storming the Capitol because they see it somehow as a personal attack on them.
I mean, the thing is, Trump says in that speech that morning, he's like, Stacey Abrams, Michelle Obama, and Oprah. I don't understand.
I ain't getting it.
But also, if you think about the call he made to the Georgia Secretary of State, like the thing, I just keep walking around my house telling my family, like, Stacey Abrams is laughing at you because he kept telling this guy, like, you need to steal a whole election because Stacey Abrams is laughing at you. And I'm like, this is the thing that sort of sets you off. Not that her critiques about me being incompetent might be real, not that she has done a lot of work and so her work is the thing that's going to make me look bad, but it's like she's laughing at you like we're in the sixth grade. And I'm like, also, anyway, it's unbelievable. But also, I was watching that, that day with my mom. I sat downstairs watching with her, and we were both just talking about how, and they're going to get away with it.
Yep.
They know it.
Yep.
And we know it, right? Ted Cruz is going to get away with it. Josh Hawley is going to get away with it. Those people in that Capitol, they knew they were going to get away with it. When we knew for sure people who look like us would not. And so you watch these things both as them, they're coming, it happens, you understand racism in America. But for me, always it's like, but damn, it hurts.
Yeah. I
right.
think
I applaud people who have gotten past the hurt part, right? And I feel like I know a lot about racial history. I'm very sober about what it means to be an American, and still you see them in that Capitol and you see the stuff that you're doing and the consequences will be minimal. And they're all sitting at home right now, and the one black guy is still in jail. Lesson learned for that young man. And the one, these things, and still you're like, wow.
I think what hurt me in a just even a slightly different way was the day before the Kenosha DA announced that he was not pressing charges against the officer that attempted to murder Jacob Blake and shot him 7 times in the back in front of his children. If people watch the video before, you see Jacob is walking away. And the reason the DA, I watched the press conference like clockwork. Once they kept the press conference under wrap because they knew some stuff was going to pop off. So I think press got 30 minutes notice, if that, about the press conference even happening. I was like, okay, let's turn into this BS. We know how these press conferences are. It's like clockwork. And it was the longest press conference, so full of BS. And the main thing that they kept saying was, well, Jacob was a perceived threat. And I wrote about this in an op-ed later on of like, that was justified because Jacob walking away from the police officer, his back to the police officer, walking away was deemed a threat. So therefore it was justified to shoot him 7 times and attempt to murder him in front of his children, basically for being black.
Walking away is a threat. Sleeping in your bed is a threat. Turning towards you is a threat. Begging for your life is a threat. Everything, at some point, if all the behavior is a threat, then you have to admit that the threat isn't the behavior, the threat is the body.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like,
so I am a threat to you no matter what I do, right? It's like, I used to tell people, like, if all these black boys who y'all complain about pull their pants up today, start wearing suspenders, would that change their job prospects? Right? And so your behavior in this situation cannot and will not save you.
Yeah, that's why respectability politics won't ever save you. So you might as well just go ahead and be liberated. Do what you want, wear what you want, be who you want, be a liberated person. Because at the end of the day,
well, I'm 48, so sometimes I'll be like, whew, I know respectability. I know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm like that commercial where the guy's like trying to explain to these people who are starting to act like their parents. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I say out loud, it doesn't matter. But sometimes in my head, I'm like, oh.
I feel you. But it's just funny because like we've seen all throughout history, right? Like we've seen people, and I've heard it myself growing up, like, oh, don't be the fast girl, or with the young black man, like you can't cry, or you can't do this, like all these things that like we're conditioned. Pull your pants up. If you want to go far, you need an education.
Right.
And then it's just like you see lawyers, black men being murdered. Right? Like your suit is not a suit of armor because your blackness is still the perceived threat, when really the threats to our democracy is not black people. or our skin, it's white supremacy. And we saw that on January 6th. They were about to overthrow the government, but for whatever reason, people are like, I don't know if we should have an impeachment. I don't know if we should expel people. They tried to overthrow the government. Like, what? How are people not seeing that?
Not only did they try to overthrow the government, but it's not just the people outside who were dangerous. It's the elected representatives who were inside. And they were talking about how we should use the election of 1876 as the measure, when the election of 1876 led to a compromise that basically re-enslaved Black people, that increased the number of lynchings with no impunity, that led to all kinds of trouble for Black people. And not only that, you have Ted Cruz, who was a person of color.
I think people forget that part.
Rafael Cruz.
Yep.
Was a person of color who was saying this. And so it's that kind of thing, you know, it was danger both inside and out. The mob, it turns out, is the least dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they were the people, they were the people who just wanted to tear up stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were probably gonna hurt people for sure if they got to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those elected officials, they're trying to hurt generations. Not individuals. They're trying to hurt generations. What they're saying is we're going to delegitimize Black voters, and we will do it now in a constitutional way. That means every time we have a situation where Black and brown voters are the reason for a person getting elected, and that's going to happen more and more and more, we can question legitimacy of that. And so our children's children, not my children, but I don't have any kids, but other people's children will still be fighting the same battle because we have enshrined it into our the way we order ourselves as a democracy. And so those people were like, give me Nancy Pelosi. Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, they were like, give me you and your children and your children's rights.
Yeah.
Because what they do the next time is use the president of this time. And the more you can call on that president, the longer you can, the more tradition becomes a thing that must be done.
Yep.
And so that's the thing that was really sort of interesting to me.
Yeah.
I don't think, Cherie says that we should talk a little bit about how do we imagine thriving in the Black community. So what's your Black political end? I think I have a goal in the things that's not the right way to say it. What are the things you're trying to accomplish in your political work? When do you feel like I've done the thing that I'm trying to do?
Yeah, I think I always like that question because I feel like it redefines success a little bit. Because again, it's not
which is necessary.
Just an election. Like, I'm not trying to just be here for an electoral outcome. I always said, if we endorse a candidate and they lose, but we increase Black voter turnout, or even just more people are aware of it, that's a win for me because my priority is the community and their level of engagement. So for me, I want everyone to be able to be equipped with the tools and the resources and tactics to be able to advocate for the things that they want, for have people to realize the agency that they have within themselves to participate in a political system that wasn't designed for us to participate. And instead of saying, you know what, I'm not even going to participate, saying, you know what, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to call this out. And so for us, we have our own values, we have our own analysis and whatnot of the issues that we work on, but it's never really on us to say, this is what we think that you as a community should be doing. Hey, buy into this. When I said that I try to take the lessons learned from my previous jobs, I think a big thing that a lot of people do is they come up with the campaign in a boardroom with some people and they say, we want to launch for example, it could be, we want to launch the Fight for 15 in this neighborhood. And I've been a part of this. You knock on doors, you got your clipboard and say, hey, my name is Angela with so-and-so. We're, getting petitions to sign on to the Fight for 15. Can you be a leader? Do you want to help organize with me? That's great and all. And people may agree with you, but that may not be their first priority.
Right.
And so what does it look like to just ask people? And so we start all of our questions when we're in the field by saying, what does it look like for the Black community to thrive? Ask and understand the issues that they have, and then we tailor our work directly to the things that people want. And you don't have to worry about getting buy-in and selling, like, hey, join us in our fight. Nah, like, we're doing the fight that you told us to fight. We got the resources and the tools and the connections. Here, let's fight together. And I think that's important. And while, like I said, we have our own values, it's not for us to tell and determine what people should organize around. to get to a point where there's so much civic engagement consciousness in the Black community that we are acting like we're 40% of the city of Milwaukee. We're flexing that political power. We have that representation, but sometimes we know not all skin folk are kinfolk, right? What does it look like to have a robust, nuanced political, Black political engagement in our community? And then also lastly, defund the police and invest those resources into our communities.
And this is why I think Cherise put us together. She's brilliant, it turns out. Because I was like, I'm gonna talk to this lady. Cherie told me to, and I don't have any other plans beyond that. I mean, I said yes before I even understood what it was I was doing. So, but I think in this moment, this is why we're together. Because one of my things as a person who teaches politics is my goal is to always take the mask off of political actors, to say that there are no superheroes in this story, only humans who use the opportunity given to them to try to change the world around them. And once you say, look, Martin Luther King was not a superhero, then that means you could be Martin Luther King, right? I mean, not Martin, but you could be the person who is impacting change in your community. But as you were talking, I'm thinking about our foremothers, right? I'm thinking about Ella Baker, I'm thinking about Diane Nash. I'm thinking about all of these women who, there's something about the politics of women, and I don't want to essentialize it, but there's a way that Black women have been trained as political actors to seek consensus, to empower other people. Maybe we do so much for other people that part of our job is always trying to help them do it for themselves. I don't know. It's like, look, I'm gonna show you how to tie your shoe once, and then you can do it. You can do it. Maybe that's also our political ethos. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to talk for you all the time. It's not my place, and it's not right. And so what I want to do, part of my political training, part of my understanding of politics, is helping individuals articulate their own political goals and desires. And in that way, it is very feminist, right, to be a facilitator of other people's political will, right? That is, I am helping you. Actually, I have this training, right? I have this set of skills, and I know kind of the rules of how politics works. That's what I have. You have your own interests. And so what I can do is I can listen to what your interests are, and together we can figure out how to build a movement that gets you to the thing that you want. And that's true for me as a teacher, and that's true for you as an organizer. And I think it's part of it is attributable, not just, so I think we like to talk a lot about how Black women did this, but I think it really is about how Black women who are feminist centered, right? Who have a certain amount of affinity towards the notion of feminism, who understand the ways that women's political work has been devalued in the past, but we don't play into that devaluing game. We don't do that. And so that means that we are sort of doing the work. And what is so lovely about it is that you're getting the credit, right? Is that people are telling the story of Georgia as a story of Black women, right? People are telling the story of Milwaukee about the ways that your group and groups like yours that are led by women of color and how they are making it work, right? And what's interesting about that to me is the ways in which people within and outside of our community feel some kind of way about that. Right? Because it's like, you can't deny who were the players in what happened in 2020. Right? I mean, Raphael Warnock is nice. He's brilliant. He's an interesting guy. But Stacey Abrams did that work for him. Right? He didn't just ride on her coattails. He literally was on her shoulders. Like, she literally walked him across that, right? And when we think about all the other examples of that, and all the women who are running down ballot, who are doing sort of local work, people like Tashora Jones, who's running for mayor, in St. Louis, and we think about it, it is it's a story that is undeniable.
Yeah.
Even though every year I teach a new group of students and I introduce them to Ella Baker and they've never heard of her before. Right? Even though there are no statues of Ella Baker and Ida B. Wells. And it's Black feminists who have made sure that their name stays alive. But I believe that your names, that coming out of this movement, your names will be the names that will be told. It won't be, oh, but look at this unsung Septima Clark. Oh, look at this unsung lady, Amelia Boynton. Oh, look at this. We won't have any more sort of mothers of the movement like Rosa Parks, whose voice was way more important than her actions, but we don't hear it. You know what I mean? And I think that part is just, it makes me so happy. And all the people who have a problem with that, you just ain't looking at the facts. You blind to the facts.
I agree. Let me get a little cynical with it, because I agree. And somebody brought this up to me recently about everybody is like, thank you, Black women saved us. And I'm like, yes, I'm glad y'all finally understand this. Cool, great. Yeah. But it's also like, yeah, we saved you, but like, you're propping up the institutions that allow for us to have to keep saving y'all. Like, how about y'all do your part and break down the institutions so we don't have to keep saving y'all's butts? Exactly. So just like, I'm wondering your thoughts and just like hearing this, if you feel that people finally get it, or if people are like, Black women saved us, thank you, on to the next. And then like, there's that expectation that we have to continue to do it all the time and fixing a broken system that they aren't ready to tear down themselves.
I think part of it is now Black women have saved us in these sort of grassroots ways that mainstream media, mainstream political actors only turn to when they needed them. Now that they know they need them, what I don't want us to do is put our heads down and get back to work, right? Put our heads down and figure out. What I want us to do is go right in their faces and say, do you remember what I did for you?
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened? Right? Do you remember? And then start. So I'm a believer in sort of an inside outside strategy. And that is, I think about the colored girls, Leah Daughtry, Mignon Moore, Donna Brazile, Yolanda Caraway. They were the women who really come of age in the 1980s. And I think about, they came, worked on the Jackson campaign. They worked on getting Martin Luther King's holiday to be a holiday. Like, they worked on all of these things. And I think about how what they did was they were like, okay, the Democratic Party, we're a two-party system, but look at what the right is doing to the Republican Party. We don't like it, but they have decided that party doesn't look like how they want it to look. And so they're making it. So the Tea Party decided to make it look different. And so people, I think, rag on the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party can be whatever you make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what they did in the 1980s was they saw what happened with Jackson. They saw what happened in the primaries. They saw how, you didn't get to Black voters until you were well in the process. And they set about changing the rules. They joined the rules committees and they joined standing committees. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to push up a Black primary early enough that Black people get their say. And that's why South Carolina votes so early. And if it wasn't for South Carolina, Barack Obama wouldn't be president. Right? And if it wasn't for South Carolina in the primary, Joe Biden wouldn't be president.
Right.
And what they did was they fixed the rules. And so I think we always need people on the streets. We always need people who are independent of the political system, who can just stand up and say, you are effing wrong. But then at some point, if we're going to be a part of this American democracy, you need to be able to vote on some of them rules as you change them.
Right.
Right. And so I'm looking for women who are going to be governors.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be selective about who those people are because they're coming.
Right.
Cynics in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party who know that Black voters support Black candidates are looking for moderate, milquetoast Black women to run for office right now, who they believe they control, who believe they can control, who they believe they can influence. We need to be looking for our own people.
Yep. Absolutely.
Who in Milwaukee are the people? So you ain't got to be the person. You just need to find the person.
Yeah.
Who is a woman, a Black woman there, a Latinx woman who is progressive, who is unafraid, who listens to you? Let's try to figure out if we could get her to run for office. So we need to be more targeted in recruiting the candidates that we want. We need to be more targeted in that way. Does that make sense? Rather than waiting on the field and saying out of the field, this is what, rises to the top, or this is the thing. We need to actually be looking at, I know in your movement right now, you got somebody who is real good at the bureaucracy, who studies the rule books. You know what I mean? Who studies the rule books, who takes pride in committee meetings, who uses the rules to trash people all over the place. That's your mayoral candidate. You need to start getting her ready. That's your city council candidate. You need to start getting her ready, right? Because she comes out of your movement and she'll eventually move away from you. It happens. But at least, and when that happens, you elect somebody else.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
No permanent enemies, no permanent friends. Yes. That's organizing, right? No permanent enemies, no permanent friends. And so if you get in that office and you start to feel comfortable and you start to understand yourself in a different way, then we'll be like, okay, bet. We also have this other lady. Would you like to run?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
And I think that's the next step for Black women. The next step for Black women is identifying their own candidates, fielding and funding them, training, fielding, and funding them, right? To move them into the political process.
I appreciate you mentioning like recruiting candidates, because I think that there are times where I often think about not just recruiting candidates, but also campaign managers, data managers, and all of that.
We need those speech writers.
Right, because we don't have that level of infrastructure in Milwaukee. Like, I'm retired from running campaigns, and it's like 5 Black people, and that's being generous. There's really like 3 of us. I'm being nice in case there's more people I don't know of now. And then there's like 2 other people. And so really just interested in thinking about the demands on, like, I think about when I used to run campaigns. Like, there were times I was running 2 or 3 races from the same cycle. I was juggling 2 or 3 candidates, and I still had a full-time job, right? Like that was what I was doing on the side.
Candidates do not come out of thin air, and we criticize the pool of candidates. That's because you need to figure out how you're going to get your people into the pool and then strategize, right? What happened in Georgia was a 10-year process. And I wish that Stacey Abrams would have been the benefactor of that, and that she would be governor right now.
And I think it goes to show that we're expected to like move mountains. We're expected to run multiple campaigns for the sake of, our city. We're expected to do all these things. We're expected almost to be perfect as Black women. We don't have that.
That's where the self-care comes in, right? I've been trying to practice, and with my best friend, we've been talking about saying no.
Yes. Ooh,
right. So now I have a new thing I told her to try. Say, I'll think about it, knowing that you're going to say no, but you feel less on the spot. So you say, I'll think about it. So now, if I tell you I think about it, it probably means I want to say no, but I don't want to say no in this conversation because I don't want to hear you go on and on and on about why I should do it, right? So that is actually another innovation of, I think, the movement for Black lives and other people who fall under that umbrella, is the notion of self-care, is the notion of the fact that you don't want to come to the end of your time in this movement and be broken down physically and mentally, and you don't want. And so I think that also, is important. I'm going to ask Cherie to put in the text how much time we have, because I don't even remember. I can talk to you forever. I love this. You know,
Same.
so one of the things we talked about before, but we didn't get to today, I think, is sort of intergenerational issues and what it means to talk to people who are in a different age, different time than you. And I think, you know, social media does not give us any kind of model for how that happens on social media.
Yeah.
It's usually just, yo, old ass should have known that this thing, you know what I mean? It's like that sort of thing. But I think what I hope people see from this is, you know, two people who are in different generations, who are thinking about the same thing, actually thinking about it in some of the same ways, but not using the same language, right? So think about how we introduced ourselves. That's when I really noticed it. And I was like, look, I'm Melanie Price. I'm gonna tell you about my work, because my work is why I'm here. My work is why I'm here. Like, I'm just so used to telling people what I do. And it's not that I don't see other things about myself. It's like, I'm working and I'm gonna tell you about my work. And you start and you say, I'm Angela Lang, I have she, her pronouns, I have this thing, I have these kinds of sensibilities, I'm pansexual, and then 14 other identity things. And I was like, should I have done that?
You started to take up space.
But there are spaces where if I didn't do that, people are like, look at her running her resume.
We can't win. We can't win.
Look at her running her resume. Or where you older people will see you do the thing you do, and they'll be like, what?
Yep.
Did she say pansexual? And they won't even be able to get to the rest of it. You will have lost them at that point. They'll be home 3 days later, still trying to figure out what the hell you were talking about. And I think that what we have to do is figure out how to get to the crux of it. And for me, part of that is I'm always trying to assess, rather than whether or not I agree with people, whether or not I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt about their sincerity. Are you asking me this question to be an asshole?
Right.
Or are you asking me this question because you sincerely want to know my answer?
Yeah.
And I try to ask questions that I sincerely want to know your answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, look, you kids, I heard you kids be doing this stuff, and then go on, tell me more about it. But you can sense when they say it, they think it's foolish.
Yep.
I might think it's foolish, but I try to ask in a way that doesn't imply, you know, I don't want to start by you thinking I'm thinking you're foolish, right? And I think that that's part of how I hope they get that from this conversation, because I'm 17 years older than you. I guess technically I could be your mama, but my mama would have been very upset about that. But you know, I think we need to model more of this. So thank also Cherie for giving us this opportunity, but also people who are practitioners and people who are scholars, right? I'm always going to think about this in terms of, all the books that I've read about this, and all the things that I have read about this, and all the other things, right? It doesn't mean that I've never been at a protest, I've never done those things. It means I'm trained as a scholar. And so it's the way I sort of think about the world. And you're trained as a person who is like, what's the action? What's the thing? And I, you know, anyway, I'm very grateful.
Me too.
For that.
I think this is great. I feel like I noticed it from the introductory call. I noticed the alignment, and I think, to me, I value that so much as like a woman that's doing this work, that sometimes I'm just like, I'm getting hit from all angles. I need someone to help, like, you know, so I really appreciate that. And I think you know,
at some point you're going to be me. Right? You're going to be the 48-year-old, and there's going to be some 20-year-old, and they're going to have a whole new set of things you have to use to introduce yourself. Right? And you're going to then have to figure out, how do I live in the space, in the space with them? Or dismiss them from the space. And you can't do that, because young people are the future, literally. Right. And that doesn't mean that they have the right to tell us what to do, but it does mean that they have a right to have a say.
Right.
In what we do.
And I definitely have been on the other end of it, where I've seen older Black women. I was like, you gotta be my mentor. And then they just like hold on to everything. And it's just like, well, I had to do this. I had to struggle. So do you.
Yeah, it's on both sides, right?
It was heartbreaking. It's just like, you know, so I think some of us have been burned by this, and that's not always hopeful in the long run. It doesn't help to leadership development. So I tell people, I'm like, I'm 31, but I'm excited for the younger people, what I call the TikTok generation. They clowning Donald Trump on TikTok. They are smart. They are savvy. I'm excited for that.
Look, my mom is 77 years old, and she says people tend to think that you get wiser as you get older, but you just get older.
Yeah, I learned that. Yeah.
And so there are old fools, and there are old people who are brilliant. There are young fools, and there are young people who are brilliant. And it is up to us as the people who see ourselves as leaders in various fields for us to figure out who we are and to make sure that we're talking to each other. So thank you for talking to me today.
You.
And thank you, Cherie, for and the Crunk Feminist Collective and Will Empower. Thank all of you guys for putting this together. I didn't know what it was going to be, but it turns out it has been a blessing.
I just had to trust the process. I was like, it's just gonna flow. It's just gonna naturally flow, and I just needed to trust the process, and it's been beautiful. So thank you.
Okay.
I feel like I've learned so much. Thank you.
All right. I think we're done.
Thanks,
I think that's it. Thank y'all. Goodbye. I don't know if